Yeah, thanks, Connor. Okay, so this is a bit of an odd talk in that Google has so many jobs, it's really, really hard to describe them. What I'm going to go through is a bunch of the kind of cool things that we're doing in the data centers. But first, I'm going to tell you a little about me. I left DCU 16, 17 years ago, probably now. Again, left computer applications, had no real idea. Was pretty sure I liked computers, but not a big fan of programming. So I ended up working with Big Iron, big Sun Microsystems stuff. Did a lot of work with Dell on their enormous big servers as well. Ended up making computers for a while with a small startup. Turns out startups are great fun, but you tend to lose your job a lot. They kind of collapse and they don't pay you for the last month. But they're great experience. They're wonderful. As long as you don't have kids or mortgages, startups are to be recommended. And then once you get kids and a mortgage, you start floating toward the sensible jobs. And Google is almost a sensible job as far as I'm concerned. So anyone here been to a data center? Not so many, so we're going to have a look through. There's not that much stuff in a data center as far as I'm concerned. The big one is location. You need somewhere that's got cheap power, possibly cheap land, cheap people, and maybe power, cooling, servers, a giant network, and humans. So we're going to go through all of those. So first of all, location, location, location. I tried to find a cool picture of the Dublin data center. I couldn't find one. It kind of made me upset. Apparently, it's always cloudy, and it was screwing up the cameras. But instead, I've got some other cool ones. This is one in the Dalles in Oregon. There's two huge buildings. The reason we put it in Oregon, it's right next to a giant big hydro dam. Apparently, this whole facility was built in 9 months. So I think there was 400 people on site, construction engineers, structural engineering, mechanical engineering, huge numbers of high voltage power experts. All data centers have giant big cooling systems. And then, of course, hundreds of tons of copper power and network wiring, huge amounts of fiber optic cable and the likes. And we'll show a bunch of the different pieces. This is in Atlanta in Georgia. Huge amounts of nuclear and renewables down Atlanta direction. That's probably why we put it in. One of my favorite data centers is Hamina. This is an old abandoned paper mill. I think the world's largest paper mill. It closed about 6 years ago. Google moved in after a few years. The place was like something out of a disaster movie. It was kind of scary. One of the buildings in this place was big enough to put 4 Boeing 737 aircraft, and now it's full of servers. We're big fans of Intel, by the way. I think we're Intel's 5th largest customer these days. We don't sell any computers, but we do buy a lot of chips. So we fill these enormous cavernous rooms with machines. So what's next, right? You need power. And there's a bunch of guys here working on the Marines. They're basically marine engines, enormous engines that would usually drive a tugboat or a battleship. And we reuse them as generators, big 2-megawatt generators. They need a lot of care and loving. We've a lot of good electrical people. So if you're doing any kind of electrician, well, it probably wouldn't be an apprenticeship, but if you're doing electrical power or electronic engineering, there's a lot of work in building Google data centers and keeping them running and repairing generators after the test has discovered a nest of rats underneath them and has blown the generator to bits. We've a huge amount of power. When you're doing power, it turns out the easiest and most efficient way of transmitting power in these data centers is by blocks of copper, or giant big strips of copper about this thick, about that kind of size. We don't use wires because wires can't carry the amount of power we use. We also do an awful lot of custom metalwork, custom equipment. In the data center, people don't sell data center equipment Google scale. I think somebody mentioned Amazon are building a bunch of data centers here in Dublin. And if you look at the footprint of, say, the Hamina data center or the Atlanta one, we tend to build them maybe 5 to 10 times bigger than anywhere else. And this means we get to make all our own stuff. A lot of the guys who are working in the data centers, of course, they might start as a network engineer or come out as a guys swapping hard drives, or sometimes we'll have software engineers in the data centers, and they end up kind of going, oh, cool, you've got all the hardware we want. You've got, you can teach me how to weld, you can teach me how to make metal equipment. So there's lots of other little extra bits. Google Data Center is also a hive of networking equipment. Most of the job is turning enormous piles of networking cables. If we have tens or hundreds of thousands of servers, maybe that's a bit too many, but we'll have a lot. Every server gets 1 or 2 or 4 cables. There's a lot of cabling in that, and it has to be tidied up. It's not just on the hardware side, of course. Google has one of the largest networks in the world globally. We hire some of the best network engineers who would have come out of companies like British Telecom or Level 3 Aircom, and then they come to Google and go, oh wow, the cable to your office is bigger than our old network back in the company. So it's pretty insane. We also build our own networking equipment. We don't just build servers, we also build our own switches and our own routers. People used to say not only do Google reinvent the wheel, they also vulcanize the rubber that are on that wheel. Here's a new build out. I think this was for the Google Fiber, Google Fiber, where we're also doing TV these days. So this was an installation where we could capture hundreds of TV channels, re-encode them and send them out as Blu-ray quality to homes across Kansas, and hopefully rolling that out more places in the world later on. So network engineer doesn't just mean you work on DSL. Sometimes it means you work piping Blu-ray quality video around the country. This is a cool picture from, this looks like Hamina again. This is our Hamina data center, I think. Again, huge amounts of power, networking, cooling infrastructure, and the volume of servers is just enormous. When you hear of some of the big top 500 supercomputers, any one of the Google clusters probably could kick its ass. It's pretty insane. So if you want to work on really high-end computing, there's only one place to come to. And I'm not really talking about servers yet, right? So when you have many servers, they need a lot of repairs. We have assembly line quality repairs systems. Me personally, I'm with the data center automation systems. So we have software that tries to identify broken or half-broken servers, trying to work out, oh, it's got a disk broken, but it's only one disk, so how about we wait until people are back from vacation and we don't have too many broken machines, and then we'll send the low priority stuff to them. We also give the engineers hints who are out fixing the machines, saying, oh, we're probably a bad hard drive, maybe a bad hard drive cable, so that they know roughly what to replace. Some of the techs, they're on the floor. They can also be replacing and spotting broken fiber cuts. I saw one of the coolest machines recently. I don't know if anyone's seen a fusion splicer. This is something that can use lasers to cut through fiber optic cables so precisely that you can then rejoin them and use the same laser to meld them back together again. Very, very cool. There's a guy using a screwdriver with force and gusto. I like that. Yes, many of our data center techs have interesting tattoos. Cool. So we also do cooling. How do you do cooling? If you have data centers that are using megawatts of heat, how do you get rid of it? Well, you have to be really smart about this. Our Hamina data center is right next to the Baltic Sea. It pulls in freezing cold water in from the sea, pumps it around a cooling plant, which pumps it around the servers. Other places like Belgium, we have an enormous canal nearby, and we take out a few 100,000 liters of water every day and evaporate that over the data center. The Dublin data center is a unique cooling system where turns out that we have moist, cool air all year round, unfortunately. So we just put fans on the side of the building and blow the air through. All of this cooling has to be moved around, so we have some really badass mechanical, thermal engineers to build and maintain all of this. It's not a simple system. And if you've got a pipe with a blockage that you don't spot really quickly, it gets very, very messy. When you have 300,000 liters of seawater all over your data center floor, you'll know all about it. There's Bob the Builder with a giant big wrench. I love that. Okay. These are more cooling towers. These are actually evaporative cooling towers, which is something we almost perfected. It's much, much more efficient than the usual refrigerator, chiller type stuff that I'd come across in data centers before Google. Because of this, we drove what we call power efficiency from 2, as in it costs you as much to cool as it does to power servers, down to 1.04. A lot of people said, hold on, that's impossible. How do you get by with 4% overhead on your power supplies in your machines, on the UPSs, on your cooling systems? And the answer is we don't have UPSs. Every system has a battery, like a laptop. We made the world's most efficient power supplies. And then when we worked out how to do that, we gave away all the patents for free. And those are now incorporated in servers that Dell and IBM and the likes make, which with no skin off our nose, and it saved the world a lot of energy. So the last part, humans. These guys are crazy Finns and friends of Finns outside our Hamina data center. So in the winter, the sea freezes open, and freezes over, and they have a few ice holes at the front that they often go fishing on. To the left there's a big sauna. So in the summer, you can go, take a trip in the sauna and then jump into the sea, because it's only like 5 or 6 degrees. I've done it once or twice, and it's not something I'd recommend. It should be done once. Every Google data center has something unique. As I mentioned, the Hamina data center has cool saunas. The Lenore data center has amazing hunting all around it. Occasionally, the guys will come in with a deer thrown over their front of their car or whatever to share with all the other guys in the data center. Data center in Belgium is in the middle of a weird concrete factory with beautiful scenic things like an enormous canal right next to it. And a lot of the guys ended up having boats on the canal. Dublin has 2 data centers, which is kind of cool. So a lot of people, especially Irish people, will start in the Google Dublin data center and take advantage of the fact that Google's big into traveling. Occasionally we'll do a big build out in Germany. So we'll say, hey, any hardware people want to go to Germany to help build out the new data center? You get 5 or 6 people to spend a few months in Germany. And after that, Taiwan, Sydney, New York, North Carolina, Atlanta, Oregon, etc. I mentioned I've been to 20 different offices and data centers, and every one has a unique culture. It's rather cool. And that's everything. Would anyone have any questions on data centers, on the kind of engineering we do here in Dublin or globally?
I have a stupid question. I've seen some of those pictures before. I'm just wondering where the stormtroopers are. Google released a couple of those pictures recently. One of them has a stormtrooper at the end of the aisle of the service, or several actually.
I wouldn't be surprised. The strangest thing I'd ever seen was a friend of mine. Well, so at Halloween, it's pretty common to come to work dressed up in your Halloween costume. A guy I know, he came dressed as a Smurf one Halloween, like white nappy, white hat, cap, and lots of blue body paint, and that was it. So obviously he told the recruiters, please don't set me up for any interviews. So they made sure he had 3 on-site interviews that day. So if you do get interviewed at Google, prepare yourself. If it's Halloween, you might get a surprise. I think in the Dublin office, if you ever get a trip in, one of the mini kitchens is done out like an Irish bar, and it's got pictures just like you'll see in an Irish bar, but they're all of people. So there's one of me wearing a suit of Viking armor, typing away at my desk one Halloween. Cool. If that's everything, I'm going to be outside and delighted to take questions later on. Thank you, guys.